Hello and welcome to another tutorial, this time expanding a little bit further on basic UV unwrap or basic UVW mapping and consequent unwrap. This is a fairly typical situation you're likely to find yourself in. You've done some modelling. In this case it's a very simple sort of treasure chest model, fairly low poly, nothing too complicated, but it would have started as a primitive, as I've mentioned before. You start modelling from a primitive, geometry primitive like a box or a cylinder. In this case, the bottom half of this model certainly was a box. The top half was a cylinder, of course, and they've both been sort of welded together and attached and so forth, and changed basically. And what happens then is, if I go to the modify panel with it selected and choose Unwrap UVW, I get to see what the UVs are now, what mapping has turned out like. And if I open it using the UV editor button, expand it a little bit here, just turn off the checkers, make it easier to see. In my 0 to 1 in V and U dimensions here, you can see that I have all my mapping coordinates, and I have my indicated in green seams here indicating the islands. And well, in essence, look, it's a mess, it's all messed up. Initially, as I say, the primitives had mapping coordinates, but they've become quite useless, and I have to reset that and create something a bit more meaningful from it. So one way of doing that is with the Unwrap UVW modifier. In face mode, or beg your pardon, polygon mode, you can select the faces you require to peel, or in this case actually first of all I'm going to reset the mapping and then do a peel. But to beware if you do this, because if you do that and think you've got everything, look around the back, and as you can see, by default with this modifier, this button here, ignore back facing, is turned on, which is quite the opposite of editable poly and the edit poly modifier. Anyway, just beware of that. In this case I want absolutely all of them, so I'm just going to hit Control A, which of course is the same as going edit, select all. You can peel just or map just sections, but I want everything, so that's what I'm doing. And then, since I'm in polygon mode, I now have the ability to apply simple mapping. So I'm going to click on planar map and then click it again to get out of that, so that I can again look at it in the UV editor. And now you see it's as if it was planar mapped straight down from the top, and it's even sort of shrink wrapped it so that this is expanded to fill the 0 to 1 space. So now I've sort of reset my mapping. I still have some green seams, but that's where I have open edges in the model, so I'm not going to get rid of those at all, whatever I do. But now it's up to me to make sense of the model and give it some fresh mapping coordinates. So just clicking into edge mode, clicking it away so that I have no edges selected. My options here are to, well, make edge selections where I want my seams to be. I can do that using Control and clicking, left clicking, and then I have the option to use this, convert edge selection to seams, turns them blue. Blue isn't green, of course, but blue is where when I peel I'm telling Max to break along here the UV mapping coordinates and turn them green. Then I will have them as an open edge, open seam. So that's one way of doing it. Another way is to use this button, Edit Seams button, where I can simply left click and the edges I click on become blue. Now if I accidentally click somewhere I don't want to have turned blue, I can always hit Alt, click again, and it deselects it. Oh, one tip would be to say turn off realistic shading, just go to shaded, because sometimes shadows get in the way. It's rather difficult to see what you've got turning blue and green and so on. Another thing would be to use the F3 wireframe toggle just to quickly see what you've got selected. Anyway, I'll continue and just click around all 6 sides of the lower half of this model. So yes, so that's it. And just finally to say that there is another tool here, which is this one, point-to-point seams, and using this it has a rubber band sort of facility, as you can see here, and you click along where you want your seam to appear until you get the desired result. When you finish, just right click to get out of that rubber band mode. So now it's ready to be peeled. In order to do that, I need to go back into polygon mode, because unless I select the faces I wish to peel, you see it's not available here under peel. I need to do my select all again. Don't fall into that trap once again. Control A for me. Now quick peel, which is what I'm going to use for this, is available. So hit quick peel. You can see that what was blue has now turned green, and if we look at the editor window, I have indeed peeled off, or Max has peeled for me, the areas I indicated to it. Now this is a handy button down here, select by element UV toggle, so using it I can pull things out without clicking that on. I get individual faces, which isn't really what I'm after. I want the whole island. This will give me the whole UV island all in one go, and doing so means I can sort of see what I've managed to unpeel and decide for myself whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, and I think generally everything's okay. What I do want to do before I pack them into this area here is to do a rotate. So with angle snap turned on and rotate here in this editor window, I'm just going to make sure these edges here, you can see here indicated, are rotated so that it's easier for me to work on them in an editing program like Photoshop, where of course I would do something like make a texture from this. So with all the elements selected, I'm going to use this option here, which you can see from the tooltip means pack normalize. Clicking on it, what Max does is it packs all those elements selected into the 0 to 1 UV space. You know, the machine does it for me, and sometimes of course it makes decisions whereby you think, well, perhaps I'll just do it a little bit differently. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to pull things around until they make a bit more sense to me, the human. So I'm just going to do that, have a little bit of extra space around the edge, and that looks pretty tidy. I like that. And so the idea behind pack normalize here is that it keeps the relationship between the various UV islands so they all remain scaled relative to one another. You can check that by choosing checker pattern from the drop down list. Have a look at the resulting checkers projected onto your model. Ideally, if you've got your UV mapping done correctly, then you have zero distortion or very little distortion, so your squares remain squares and not oblongs or stretched. And also your texel or texture pixels wrapped around your model are of a consistent size. So this area here has the same colours, same size squares as those over here. If these down here were greatly smaller, say, then you may get along this seam some artifacting, or you'd be able to see the difference between these two islands on the same model. And of course your eye would be drawn to that and your model would be less convincing, so we try and avoid mismatching of texel density. So there you go. From here you can use tools to render the UVW template like that. You can then save it from the frame buffer as a file, take it into Photoshop, and then use it to draw as a template for making your final texture for the object. So yes, once you've done your mapping, you can just collapse all, and that will sort of mean that those UV coordinates are no longer editable. You've done your UV unwrap. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.